April 17th.
Burned into your memory.
Oh yeah, absolutely. There's no way that that's not burned into my memory. So it's probably always going to be burned into my memory.
Today we're here with Hope. She is a senior at Florida State University and was on campus for the recent active shooter event and is going to tell us her story. So set the stage for us a little bit. Before the incident began, where were you? What were you doing? What was going on? Normal day?
So yeah, it was a normal day. I had class right around 11:30. So went to the gym right on campus, and then right after class, I would park my car. I always at the gym, and then I would walk over to my building, which was about a 15-20 minute walk. But yeah, it started out great. I loved my class at the time. There was about 25 people in my class. We've all had the same class consecutively since we're all in the same program. And around 11:59, my class opens up outside to the outside courtyard area. And there's a road that we can see from our door. And we left the door open. It was a nice day outside. And all of a sudden you hear cop car after cop car. There was probably about 12 of them. And we're all kind of looking at each other. There's an area right outside of campus, which we call College Town, which is, there's restaurants, there's apartments, stores, whatnot. So we had just figured something had happened right next door in College Town. So we were like, it's a lot of cars that are driving down with their sirens on. And about 4 or 5 minutes later, we hear an unknown sound. I did not know that we had these in our rooms, but there was an alarm system that went off in our classroom saying that there was a active shooter in the student union, which was right down the road from us. And we all kind of looked at each other like, are they for real? Is this really happening? We all got it on our phones as well from the FSU PD. It's an FSU PD alert that said, go take cover, and either if you're near campus, like get away from campus. If you're in campus, it's time to take cover and go through lockdown. And that was kind of what started the fiasco of the day.
Wow. Interesting way to find out about it. What did that mean to you and your classmates, the instructions to take cover and lockdown?
So, funny enough, my 4 years at university, we have never discussed steps to take in case of a lockdown or an active situation going on campus.
Wait a minute. There's never been a drill, no policy discussion, no 4 years you've been there? And
I mean, in my experiences being there, we have never practiced it. We have never done a drill or a practice. We had obviously done it in high school countless of times. I think we did it every other month, a different certain situation. But in university, I think the mental note of what we did in high school was just always in the back of my head, saying like, okay, like in case this does happen, at least I have the drills and the practices that I did in high school. But no, there was, at least in the classes that I took personally, there was never any drill to practice in the event of that happening.
So then tell us how that unfolded. You get the alert from this new alarm system you've never heard. You get a message from campus that says take cover, and then announces a lockdown. What unfolded after that?
So my first instinct was the door is open. I can see across the street. I know a few friends who live in the apartments across the street, and my first instinct was I just want to bolt. I want to run out of this place, because in the event that my room is approached by whoever or how many other there were. I am personally not good with sitting and taking cover and lockdown in a classroom. My first instinct is I want to get out of here and run as far away as possible. My professor did make us stay in the classroom. We barricaded our door with chairs and tables and anything that we had. And the way that our classroom was set up is they have a huge table that kind of did a little arch thing. And we took part of that table because it was detachable, again, put it against the door. And then we all hid behind it. But besides the one door that opened outside to the courtyard, there wasn't any other way to get out of the classroom.
I assume you guys got the door locked before you barricaded it?
So most of our doors, as far as I know, did not lock. Ours was not able to lock. I was texting my dad during this whole situation, and he was literally trying to send me WikiHows on how to lock a door from the inside. And one of them was by using a chair, but the way that our chairs and desks are set up is the chairs are attached and they're swivel chairs. So you're like, how do I can't detach this chair. It's not tall enough to reach the door. So our best bet was to just throw as much stuff as possible and hope for the best.
So what happened then? Well, I'll tell you what. Walk me back through. So the event unfolds. You guys know that something's going on and it's fairly serious. You take the immediate action. At what point does the texting with the parents start? And tell me a little bit about that part of it.
So I think I waited a few minutes until I informed my parents. I think more just because the initial shock was setting into my body. I think there was a good 3 or 4 seconds that I was like, I have the ability to get really hurt in this situation, or like I have the ability for something real. Like there is a possibility of something really bad happening. And I think my fellow classmates kind of went through the same thing. There was a lot of panic at first because we truly did not, nobody expects to go through this. So especially just with, how the class was and everything, it's not anything that is your first line of thought in the morning, obviously. And so my initial thought was, okay, I know that this is being sent out by the university, but truly, none of us know what is going on. None of us know the in-depth situation. And I wanted to personally wait a little bit before I told my parents that, hey, I'm obviously in an active shooting on campus. But I think by the time that national news set in and all of the medias and our alerts are set up, parents have the opportunity to connect the alerts that we get as students to their phones. And that's how my dad found out. So he got an alert saying that there was an active shooter at the student union. So I was pretty quick to getting in contact with my dad. But my mom, however, it took a couple of minutes before I was in contact with her. But I wanted to let them know that I was at least safe. I just kind of bluntly told them what was happening. I said, hey, there's an active shooter on campus near the union. I'm in my class. Here's where my class is located. I'm not sure full details, but we have already seen a ton of first responders drive by, and just want to let you know that I'm okay. I'm with my teacher. I'm with my classmates. And we've barricaded our room and everything. So.
Yeah. How did that communication with your parents go?
With my dad, I love my dad with all of my heart. I have a really good feeling, of course, that he was internally freaking out. But he was very calm about it. He played a good role in keeping me calm. At least he was he was sending me maps of, okay, this is where the shooter is located. This is where your building is. Here is the closest road. Here's the closest apartment. They've already, he was watching the news like crazy, and he's like, okay, there's probably 60 cops there right now. They have one guy down. So he was kind of affirming me that I was going to be okay. And he was like, okay, are you close to a public building? Can you leave? What do you have in your classroom that you can use? We had a fire extinguisher. We did have a kid who armed himself with the fire extinguisher. We had a bunch of girls in our class who had pepper sprays, so they had their pepper sprays. And I think that helped a little bit put our mind at ease that we weren't officially helpless in that situation. We did have certain things that we could use in the event that somebody was to enter our building. But the communication with my dad was pretty good. He stayed pretty calm throughout it, and he stayed pretty updated with what the media was saying and what national news was saying. My mom.
Well, before you talk about your mom, let me ask you this, because the thing about him texting you the map of where you were to where the shooter was, the event was, how helpful or meaningful was that to you and your classmates? Did that turn out to be a very impactful thing?
Yeah, I think that it helped just knowing, kind of seeing on a physical map, the distance and the probability of that one individual reaching our building. When we first got the notification, obviously the only information that we got was there is an active shooter near the student union. So we had no idea what that necessarily entailed to. We had no idea, obviously, if he was taken down by first responders or if there were multiple. And so I think that initial fear set in during then, but after seeing kind of more what the media was saying and seeing, what our parents were saying to us about the situation, I think the initial fear started to ease down as time went on. So
tell us about the communication with your mom.
Obviously, my mom was freaked out. Sorry, Mom, I love you. As any parent would be in that situation. I mean, I think no parent ever wants to get that text from their kid or hear it on national television that there is an event going on at their school and that their students are in danger. She was just same thing. She was a little freaked out at first, very affirming. She was obviously talking to colleagues, and her colleagues were addressing to her that our school was on the national news and that there was a active shooting that was currently happening. So she was a little freaked out by that, but obviously after hearing that I was okay, and same thing, hearing the distance of how far away the shooter was, she was more worried about how I was doing mentally in this whole situation, and just kind of the whole overall experience. So, but the whole time that I was in lockdown, the whole 4 hours that I was in lockdown, she was texting me and checking up on me and, kind of letting me know, okay, this is what they're saying is going on. They're letting out these buildings. They're relocating these people over here. She was asking about my friends, my roommates, people who work at the church right across the street from the student union that I'm involved with. So, but yeah, I talked to them the whole 4 hours.
How much of the information that you got about what was going on came from those texts from your parents and the other parents, as opposed to being directly told and kept informed by the university, the alert system, or any official notifications?
Yeah. So based off of my memory, I might be not completely wrong in this, but based off of the public access that I had with our phones and laptops and everything, as well as what our professor had, I really only recall getting a alert as the initial investigation was happening in the ongoing situation currently happening, stating that there was an active shooter near the student union. We were all in lockdown, crouched down, like checking on our phones, seeing what the media was saying, because we obviously knew that this was going to be widespread media within a couple of minutes. And it was honestly completely unclear as of like what was happening. A lot of media stations were saying different numbers about who was injured or different numbers on casualties. A lot of them were also saying different numbers on how many active shooters there were at the time. And so that was really unsettling because, these were supposed to be trusted sources and we have no idea what's going on. And I know it's a situation where there's a lot of uncertainty, especially when it's happening real time. But it was really hard to know what was truly going on. We were trying to constantly follow FSUPD's Twitter, and that got more information after a couple of hours. But it's so unbelievably hard in this day and age when, especially students are going towards social media platforms like Twitter and Instagram and Facebook. We use like an app called Yik Yak too, where students post things. It's very similar to Twitter. And just seeing what students were saying and getting the false information that they had. They were posting pictures of shooters that weren't even directly associated with our shooting, that were from years ago. And they were saying like, this is the guy, like this is the gun. And, it's really hard. And you're just kind of watching, like, I have no idea what's going on right now. I have no idea what to trust. I have this news station saying one thing. I have this news station saying another. And it's really hard when you're also surrounded with your peers who are also clueless onto what's going on. And they start freaking out because they're seeing something else. And then it causes panic amongst everyone else. So it's just it's an unpredictable situation to be in, but it is still trying to stay as calm as you can in this day and age where you don't know what necessarily to trust is sometimes impossible.
You mentioned a little earlier about the emotional feelings that you were having. Can you talk a little bit about what that was like for you, for the other students in the class with you, for your professor? 4 hours is a long time to sit with that. Can you share that a little?
Excuse me. Yeah. So, I mean, like I said earlier, there were a few moments in the very beginning where there was a lot of fear about my safety and, the idea like something really bad can happen and I really don't want to experience that. And then it starts going into, I know people who go to the union every single day for lunch. And, people are saying that there have been people who have been shot and hurt. And now I was sitting there towards the middle of it, just like praying that it wasn't somebody that I knew. Like I said earlier, I am very involved with the church that is right across the street from me in Union. And like, same thing, I was just like, oh my gosh, like, I know that there are students that are there who walk to class every single day, which is right next to the Union. And then kind of aftermath, seeing the videos of where the shooter was located and stuff like that. It was just like, it was a complete, like, I have no words to express like the distraught that I had that like that happened. And just like, you walk that every single day, and our campus is open. It's so wide, like anybody can enter campus, anybody can park at school and go to the Union for food, and they don't have to be a student. They can just go and order lunch there. And it was a lot. I think I was out of it for like a whole week, and kind of coming home after that, driving my car home after the shooting, and kind of like seeing my roommates. It was just like, I think we all kind of broke down and cried together a little bit. But and I know a lot of the kids in my class too experienced the same thing. Not to speak for them directly, but they all being together has kind of brought us closer, because we went through a really traumatic experience. I know my professor felt a little unprepared in that situation, and she openly expressed that to us, and she was trying to do everything in her power to keep us safe and trying to update us with the most factual information she thinks she could have at the time. And she, especially her being a previous reporter for the news, so she was kind of trying her best to stay calm. There were a couple of times, I think, as a whole, our class was definitely in panic mode, her included. But I mean, that's what it is, being human in that type of situation. Sometimes that's uncontrollable, and sometimes, even though like you try to control it as much as you can, it's sometimes unthinkables happen, and you don't know how your body's going to react. You don't know how your mind's going to react, and it's a lot.
Yeah. How has the aftermath of this been for you?
It's definitely like always in the back of my mind that this happened. We don't really talk about it at the university anymore, at least in my classes. I'm a senior, so I only have 1 or 2 in-person classes right now, but being in those classes, and we haven't really fully discussed what happened. I personally know people who never returned after that day. They transferred, or they just said, I can't even face the university anymore. Like, I can't go back, because it's just so different with how big the university is. There were a lot of people that were on campus that day. There were a lot of people who were in buildings that were way closer. There were people that were in different forms of the lockdown retrieval. And, fortunately for my group, even though that we were in lockdown for 4 hours, we were able to kind of calmly evacuate. But for others, unfortunately, there was kind of more of a serious evacuation where, obviously there are first responders coming in and clearing the areas and making people run, and making people be transported to the reunion area, which was our civic center down the road. But there was a lot that I know a lot of people had a different experience with it, and a lot of people have been affected differently. I do wish they would talk about it a little bit more. I wish that the university would have said something going into this semester, or I wish that there would be a little bit more talk about, okay, so we've experienced that. Now let's talk about, in case that were to happen again, let's figure out what it is that we would do. I do know in my in-person class this semester, our doors do lock now. So that's
Progress.
good. That is progress. And there's a safety button that, you press and it automatically locks down not the building, but it automatically locks down the classroom. But it's been interesting kind of still being there and still kind of walking around knowing like, okay, like this did happen at our school. I will say though, I think our student body as a whole really got closer together. There was more of a united feeling going to our school, especially just with the visual that we had, and people just wanted to like be with each other. And I think that was something that was really eye-opening for me, especially like coming back. Like everyone's just more cautious about their safety in any sort of environment, whether it's at the school, whether it's down in college town, like all of that type of stuff. Everyone's kind of just more aware. And I think that's really beautiful about the situation. But it's like I said, it's not something you ever think about going through. And especially at a public university where it's completely open. There's so many buildings, there's so many open areas of courtyards and everything, and so many public access points. So it's crazy.
Educators and parents alike often speculate openly and discuss the wisdom of talking about it. Mm-hmm. Talking about it ahead of time, of whether drills are more harmful than helpful. It's an interesting debate, and quite honestly, one for me as a responder that I don't really understand. I'm a parent as well, as I know you know, and have dealt with the emotions and that those challenges before. But I also have to recognize that my own background as a responder probably biases me a little bit. But you mentioned that you kind of wish that the university at this semester talked about it a little bit more. Mm-hmm. What are your thoughts and feelings? I mean, if you could talk to educators, whether we're talking high school, college, whatever, sadly, elementary, junior high, if you could talk to educators and parents about that, what would be your guidance? Excuse me.
It's a really interesting question that I don't feel like I fully can answer based off of like what works for me, because everyone's different. Everyone deals with these situations differently. I do think that as far as talking about it at the university, I do know our university has tons of resources. They try to advertise it as much as they can. If you need to talk to somebody about the situation, if you just need to talk to somebody in general, they have tons of counseling opportunities, tons of organizations that can help in that matter. But I think noticing that everybody, regardless if you were on campus or regardless if you were not on campus, even parents, like you said, anybody that was associated with the school when that happened has some sort of traumatic response to this. For example, one of my roommates was not on campus when this happened, but I know her initial fear and her initial trauma that she got with it was the same thing that I was experiencing, wondering if any of my friends were okay, if any of my roommates were okay. And so I think it's important to point out that more than just the people who were on campus were heavily affected by this. Like you said, there are parents who, have to understand that this is happening to their kids at the moment. And especially if you're a student who is out of state or is far away, how do you respond to those parents who don't have the ability to, talk to their kids or talk to anybody from the university? So I do think that what works for me is definitely talking through everything that has happened and everything that we've been through. But I would just say on the response side of it as a whole, just being able to talk to anybody who needs it, regardless if they were a student, regardless if they are a parent, regardless if they're an alumni who is a diehard Florida State fan who
I love you, but War Eagle.
All of that type of stuff. It's just like having the resources is very beneficial, and I think it's a blessing to have that type of stuff. And also building more resources for people who might have not felt the traumatic response to it initially, but down the road really processed everything that happened, and just making sure that it's always there, no matter the time or the date or even the community that you fall in. So,
Well, along those lines, what are your feelings about training, planning, drilling that ahead of the potential of an event, to say, okay, these are our plans. This is what a lockdown means. This is what you're expected to do. This is how we'll implement it. This is how we'll communicate it. Or you mentioned when in high school you were doing them every other month. There are some educators and parents that think that does more harm than good. You've grown up with that risk. You obviously went to a high school that embraced, talking about it and practicing it ahead of time. What are your feelings about that now, having gone through an event? And as you said, from the university point of view, not really something they spend a lot of time talking about or, talking about planning. Do you think it's good? Do you think it's bad? Do you have a strong feeling one way or the other?
I think I have to say that I don't have a strong feeling one way or the other. I can see the good and the bad of both situations. I think what should be important is understanding that there is so much that goes on, especially in, like you said, a public university. There is so much that goes on in this huge campus. Florida State probably goes 3 or 4 miles of classrooms, of buildings and meeting rooms and all that type of stuff, libraries, food courts, like all of these type of things. So I feel like it's really hard to establish a procedure that can be used by every single person on campus. I think, especially you have to look at the fact that we have lecture halls that are 500 people. Like there's 500 people in a room that might be 2 or 3 stories high that only has one exit. What do you do in that situation? Same thing when it comes to libraries and stuff like that. Again, 5 stories of buildings or 5 stories of libraries or whatever that only have 1 or 2 exits. What do you do then? I think it's really hard to sit a whole student body and a whole group of professors and staff and admin and say, this is the thing that you have to do. I think there needs to be more of a procedure for multiple instances. You know, you also have to consider the fact that there are thousands of students just walking to classes daily, or they're just running around campus, or they're, you know, playing sports in our courtyards. There's just so many things that happen. You have visitors, you have guests, you have people doing tours. And I think it really has to come down to creating procedures that specifically target those situations. And like, this is what you do if you're in class. This is what you do if you're in a public area on campus. This is what, you know, here's our emergency procedure in the event that you're in the gym, in the swimming pool, you know, because there were students swimming as this whole thing is happening. You know, this is just, there's a lot of different things that talking to fellow students say, like, oh, this is what I was doing in the event, like, as this was happening, and kind of thinking to yourself, well, what is the correct procedure? What's the correct steps to take to, you know, effectively lock down or effectively evacuate these students who are just in this particular area. And I know, as far as a couple of instances that I heard, you know, there are some buildings that were able to kind of lock down completely because they are, you know, facilities that close at certain hours. So I know that there were a lot of bigger facilities that had areas where they could lock down and lock the door, which I think is great. But, you know, in my case, where it's a small classroom building that opens up outside that can only fit maybe 20 students at a time, that is used periodically throughout the day by many different professors, there's not really an instance where those type of buildings can be locked because they're being used all day. And, you know, when you're in a secluded classroom like that, where there's not like a basement or a specific room or an office that you can get in and close the door, that's where I feel like the evacuation process or the lockdown process that you're talking about is way different than being in a study room or being in a lecture hall or being at the gym or anything else like that.
It's a very insightful point. So our longtime listeners of our podcast will remember an episode I did about a year ago with a young man from local high school that had an incident where he was telling a story about another student that had brought a gun into the classroom and how that unfolded with law enforcement. That was your younger brother.
That was my younger brother.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how do your parents feel?
So I can't speak for them, but if I was a parent and that happened to both my kids, who one being in high school and one being at college, it just kind of opens up a way bigger picture of the possibilities that happened. And I do remember getting a text from my mom just saying, like, I'm just so nervous for you and for your brother with everything going on in the world and everything that you guys have been through. Like, it makes it so much more real that these things happen. And I remember getting that text and I was just like, it's an unreal feeling. It's an unreal, it's not, what are the chances that my younger brother 4 years ago witnessed a student that he was sitting next to be escorted out by police because he had a gun in his backpack, and then 4 years later, I'm in a active shooting at my university in lockdown, and same thing, just unreal. It's an unreal thing that I think is unimaginable, and I can't personally talk about what my parents have gone through or what they felt about that because I'm not them, but I would assume that it's the unimaginable, especially for your kids, and yeah, it's a lot.
Have you guys talked about that at home?
Oh yeah, absolutely. We're a pretty open family. We talk about everything. So we obviously had a lot of conversations about the things that we've gone through, about the things that we were feeling in those situations. My brother and I talked about it a lot because we had gone through similar situations. But yeah, we're really open about everything that goes on in our lives. My family is the closest people in my life. So being able to turn to them, and, they obviously gave the opportunity, saying, like, if you need to come home, like, come home. We'll do whatever you can. We'll do whatever we can to make this situation better. If you need to talk to somebody, we can figure that out. But same thing too, like, as much as they were there for me, I think I tried to be there as much for them, because I just wanted to kind of reassure them that, like, I'm doing okay with this. And, I know they went through a lot of mental turmoil and everything, and especially with both of us experiencing that. So I think trying to be there as much as I can be for them, and then them doing the same thing to me, I think that's kind of what has gotten us through this. And I'm super grateful for them, as you know.
So we'll have to see if we can get your mom and dad to come in and talk to us well, and hear their perspective.
I'm curious to hear what they have to say about everything, because I know as a parent, like, they act all big and tough, but
hey, don't give away our parent secrets.
Yeah, but I would like to know what I want to know their thought process of what they went through and everything, and how they truly feel, because I know they wouldn't tell me to freak me out. But
well, Hope, we'll see if we can make that happen. Thank you so much for coming in and telling us your story and sharing.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I really appreciate being here and sitting with you.
It's our pleasure. Our pleasure. All right. Thanks, everybody, to our producer, Carla Torres, who's sitting off camera. Thank you so much for pulling all this together. Thank you, Hope, for taking time out of school to come down and do the interview and talk. Appreciate it. Until next time, stay safe.